I was born in a place called Irumo, a parish called Irumo, a village called Rushoroza, where Chirambe market is. That's where I was born. And then we migrated from Chirambe, which is about 7 kilometers from here, to this place. And I attended the Bubanjizi Primary School from primary 1 to primary 6. Then I briefly went to St. Kabwa Junior Secondary School. And then I went to Mutorere for P7. Then from Mutorere we went to a transfer to Rushoroza for P8. Then I did P8 in Mutorere. I mean in Rushoroza, Kabare. Then I went to Kitab Seminary for 1 year. And I disagreed with the people who were teaching me over quite a number of issues. So I was advised to leave the school. And when I left, I decided not to go back to school. I did self-education and went to Makerere University. And from Makerere University, I went to Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I served as a foreign service officer. And while I was at Makerere, we were fighting against Idi Amin. That's when I joined Fronasa. And from there on, the rest is what is known. From Makerere, we went to the bush. To foreign service. We went to the bush up to now. There are quite a lot of things I didn't agree with, especially subjects about morality and philosophy. I realized that it came to me, it struck me that what we were being taught was not exactly, apart from the sciences, but the humanities, I didn't quite agree with. For instance, we were being taught European history. And I found it very interesting that I should be taught about what happened in Europe and not what happened in Africa. There are quite a lot of things I will write about later on that I didn't agree with. Questions of religion, there were many answers, questions unanswered, which I asked them because I was in a seminary. There were quite a lot of things I wanted to know, and I was told just believe. And I found it a bit disturbing that you should tell me something that doesn't make logic and you say I should believe, instead of giving an explanation. So I thought educating myself and doing other things was a much better option for life than sitting in a classroom and being told things you don't agree with. Being taught in a classroom and reading for yourself is the same thing. Actually, reading is better self-education than listening to the teacher. Because if you don't understand something, you make references to other books. And you actually get knowledge the teacher does not have. Teachers don't know everything. They are guides. But if I can get guidance from a book, why should I resort to a teacher? When I've seen Jesus, why do I need a priest? If I've got to Jesus, why do I need a priest for? Yeah, that's what I did, and I started the mature age entrance examination and passed and went to Makerere University. Well, there are many things I thought I would be, but then this exigencies of the situation dictated what I finally became. Because while I was reading and looking at what was happening in the country, I realized that there are quite a lot of things that we could achieve for the country, for the stability of the country, rather than pursuing the careers in engineering and medicine and what. Because if you don't have safety, everything else falls by the wayside. We had to pursue security to ensure that our country is secure and stable. once the country is secure and stable, then everything else can follow. Like if they were shooting across the street there, wouldn't sit here and conduct an interview. So I realized that we had to stabilize the politics of our country to get rid of a fellow like the people like Idi Amin and the ilk, in order to be able to pursue our careers. No, those were turbulent times. The situation was so unstable, you couldn't even dream of a career. It was a falsehood to believe that you would be anything in an unstable environment. And I realized that at a very early age. I pursued political science and public administration, and that's what I majored in. Political science and public administration. And then I did international relations and international law, and political geography and geopolitics. And then I did comparative African studies, contemporary Africa, government and politics in Africa. Those were my major posts. Remember, we were doing that under Idi Amin. The Idi Amin regime, in particular in Uganda, and what was happening on the continent. Because Idi Amin at that time was not alone. There were quite a lot of things going wrong. Because of what Idi Amin was doing, we were forced to even to look at the greater Africa, and it dwelled upon us that liberating Uganda was not complete, was not enough without liberating Africa. So our politics was not struggling to liberate Uganda, but struggling to liberate Uganda and then use Uganda to influence the rest of politics on the continent. No, it's a struggle. Struggles don't end in one day. Yes, we've been able to influence events because we've been able to influence politics in Uganda. We've been able to influence politics on the continent. We, for instance, achieved resurrected the East African community. We've influenced COMESA. We've influenced the politics in the neighborhood. We fought for the liberation of the African peoples, black peoples in the South Sudan. We've, by example, shown other liberation movements and other struggling peoples in the world, or on the continent and in the world, how they can liberate themselves. Even setting an example itself is good enough. I had participated in the anti-Amin struggle. And when the 1979 war ended, the subsequent events clearly showed that the question of liberating Uganda had not been resolved. Quite a lot of things were left undone. You could clearly see that the politics were not going to be stable. So in my mind, I realized we were going to have to fight again. There was going to be another showdown before we could stabilize the country. That's why President Museveni accuses me of asking him to take off guns and keep them instead of giving them surrendering them to the government. He always says I asked him to hide guns, so because we didn't trust the people we were going to work with. But I could clearly see that we were going to have another showdown, and we needed weapons. Then he had to reason to me, and we surrendered all the weapons. So that's why I always remind him that I told him we should conceal weapons, and he refused. And it took us 5 years to get on top of things in Uganda once again. But I could clearly see the question of liberation of Uganda was not resolved in 1979, and we were going to have another showdown. First of all, the elections were fraudulent. The fraud in the elections was so glaring that it was difficult to push it under the carpet. Secondly, the contradictions the inter-party contradictions, the contradictions between DP and UPC were irreconcilable. Then the contradictions within the UPC itself, the contradictions within the UPC itself were such that there was an undeclared civil war within the UPC. So the whole thing, the whole political fabric was going to fall asunder, and nobody could. We didn't have the threads that could keep the country together. We had to struggle to ensure that we get rid of that and get the country out of the doldrums, the political impasse that was obtaining then, in order for us to be able to move. It took long because we had to prepare. First of all, when we started, we had no weapons. Secondly, the population did not understand what we were struggling for. Thirdly, we had to do organization to be able to take over the state. Not only take over the state, but to run it. We had to prepare cadres, we had to prepare this, we had to prepare that, we had to get weapons, we had to get weapons and get sufficient strength. Not only take over the state, but also to maintain the state and stabilize the country. And that doesn't take a short time. Because if you had hurried, yes, you can take Kampala, but have you got capacity to control the whole country? It's not enough to overthrow government. You have to have capacity to take over the whole country and stabilize it. We organized ourselves, we trained, we acquired weapons, and ironically, the then government was our quartermaster general, because we used the same weapons they were using against them. We were all drawing ammunition and weapons from the same store. Food, ammunition, uniform from the same store. The state was fractured under Milton Obote. It is a fallacy to say there was a government Obote too. Frankly speaking, the late Milton Obote was not in charge of government. There were many power centers. Buanga was a power center. My friend Chris Kwakasisi was a power center. Peter Tai was a power center. Kuruza Chirunda was a power center. Oito Jok was a power center, and others. So Milton Obote was torn between all these different factions, which some of them didn't see eye to eye, and in those 4 years, you can safely say he had no control, and when he was removed, then you recall that there were 7 governments in Kampala, in Uganda, 6 in Kampala, 1 in the west.